Imagine, if you will, just picture this scenario for a second. You are 30,000 feet over the dark, freezing expanse of the Atlantic Ocean.
Right.
You are inside an ultra-luxury private jet, the kind of aircraft where, the carpeting alone probably costs more than most people's houses.
Yeah, the real high-end stuff.
Exactly. And there are only 5 people on board. One of them is the billionaire owner of the plane, Marcus Vance. So shortly after takeoff, he retires to his private locked master suite at the rear of the aircraft.
Okay.
2 hours into the flight attendant knocks on the door just to check on him. There's no answer. They bypass the lock, they swing the door open, and they find that the suite is completely empty.
Which, I mean, if we just look at the pure physics of the situation, that is an absolute impossibility.
Right.
This isn't a house with a back window you can climb out of. It is a sealed metal tube traveling at, hundreds of miles per hour through the stratosphere?
Yeah, your immediate thought might be, well, maybe he opened a door and jumped.
Yeah.
But if you know anything about aviation, you know that at 30,000 feet, the cabin is highly pressurized.
Highly.
Opening a door to the outside isn't just difficult. Against that kind of atmospheric pressure difference, it's practically superhuman.
It would require thousands of pounds of force.
Exactly. And even if someone somehow managed it, there would be massive screaming alarms. You'd have explosive decompression.
Oxygen masks would drop.
Right. And none of that happened. He just simply vanished from a securely locked room in the sky.
It's wild.
It is. So fast forward to when the plane finally touches down in London. The ground crew starts their post-flight checks, and they make a genuinely gruesome discovery.
Yeah, this is where it gets really dark.
Tucked away inside the unpressurized freezing cavern of the landing gear bay, they find Marcus Vance. He is dead. In fact, he is frozen completely black from the high-altitude temperatures.
It's an incredibly shocking image to try and, process.
Yeah.
But the autopsy is where this locked room mystery shatters everything we think we know about physics and biology and just linear time.
Yes.
Because the forensic pathologist didn't just determine how he died. By examining the cellular structure of his tissues, they determined exactly when.
And the timeline is the absolute bombshell of this entire case.
Yeah.
The forensic team proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that his lungs contained 0 oxygen.
0.
He died of asphyxiation. But he didn't die during the flight. He died precisely 3 hours before the plane ever left the runway in New York.
I mean, take a second to really let that sink in. He was dead for 3 entire hours before the flight took off.
Yeah.
Yet somehow, she supposedly walked up the stairs, greeted his crew, and boarded that plane alive.
If you are listening to this, you might think you've heard every true crime scenario or every locked room mystery out there.
Yeah.
But what you are about to explore today completely redefines the concept of a ghost flight.
It really does.
Our mission on this deep dive is to dissect this physically impossible timeline. We're going to unravel the terrifying, bleeding-edge mechanical sabotage used to literally puppet a human corpse.
Unbelievable stuff.
We're going to examine the dark corporate history of the suspects, and ultimately, we're going to reveal why the real killer might just be sitting right next to us, hiding in plain sight.
It is a case that forces us to question our own senses, our absolute reliance on technology, and the very nature of what it means to project the illusion of life in front of an audience.
So let's get into it. The facts of the crime scene are just irreconcilable. On one hand, you have a man who is found frozen solid in the landing gear, dead from asphyxiation.
Right.
On the other hand, you have his locked master suite, breached mid-flight to find him missing. It's like we are dealing with a Schrodinger's billionaire.
That's a great way to put it.
How can a man be simultaneously dead on the tarmac in New York and alive in a locked room at 30,000 feet over the Atlantic?
Yeah.
I have to ask the most obvious question first, because my brain is it's trying to find the simplest way out of this paradox.
Sure, go for it.
Is it possible the forensic examiner was just completely wrong about the time of death? I mean, we hear about forensic mistakes all the time.
Yeah.
Could the timeline just be a colossal medical error?
It's the most natural question to ask, really, because human beings are wired to reject the impossible.
Right.
We look for human error first because a botched autopsy is far less terrifying than a walking corpse.
Very true.
But the extreme environment of the landing gear bay actually cemented the forensic timeline in a way that makes it undeniable. High-altitude freezing is brutal, and it's instantaneous.
Yeah.
At 30,000 feet, temperatures can easily drop to minus 60 degrees Fahrenheit. The report states the body was found frozen black. And that isn't just a colorful description. What we are talking about is deep, severe frostbite, cellular destruction caused by extreme cold, combined with the pooling of totally deoxygenated blood.
Because he died of asphyxiation, right? So his body was starved of oxygen before the cold even hit him.
Correct. And to say his lungs and tissues contain zero oxygen, that's a highly specific, measurable physiological state.
Okay.
When a human dies of asphyxiation, meaning a complete lack of oxygen in the breathing environment, the metabolic processes in the cells don't just shut off like a light switch.
They don't.
No, they panic. They consume whatever residual oxygen is left in the bloodstream, pulling it out of the hemoglobin until there's absolutely none remaining.
I see.
Because of this, the blood becomes profoundly deoxygenated. You know how oxygen-rich blood is bright red?
Right.
Well, completely deoxygenated blood changes to a very dark, viscous, almost black-blue color. This phenomenon is reflected in livor mortis, or lividity, which is the pooling of blood after death.
So his blood turned essentially black from the lack of oxygen, and then the extreme cold of the flight flash froze him in that exact precise state, like a macabre time capsule.
That is a perfect way to put it. The intense, rapid cold preserved the enzymatic and cellular evidence perfectly.
Oh, wow.
Normally, decomposition muddies the waters when a medical examiner is trying to determine the time of death. Bacteria in the gut start breaking down tissues. Core temperatures drop at variable rates depending on the room or the weather.
Right, it's usually an estimate.
Exactly, it becomes a guessing game based on algorithms. But here, the decomposition was halted completely by the minus 60-degree environment. Forensic pathologists can measure the degradation of specific proteins, as well as the potassium levels in the vitreous humor.
Wait, the vitreous humor, that's the clear fluid in the eye, right?
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Because he was put into a deep freeze shortly after death, those chemical markers were locked in place. The 3-hour gap isn't a rough estimate. It is an absolute, immutable, scientific truth based on the exact halt of cellular degradation. He was dead 3 hours before that jet started its engines.
Man, if we accept that as undeniable scientific truth, the logistical nightmare of this crime becomes staggering.
Oh, absolutely.
Think about it. If he died on the ground in his penthouse, the killer didn't just quietly murder him and slip out the back door. They had to somehow transport roughly 200 pounds of completely dead weight out of a building through a city and onto a highly secure private aircraft.
Yeah, that's no small feat.
You don't just throw a billionaire over your shoulder like a sack of potatoes and stroll past airport security. I mean, private terminals are discreet, sure, and they bypass the standard TSA lines, but there are still security cameras everywhere.
Everywhere.
There are ground crews fueling the plane, baggage handlers loading catering, security guards checking manifests.
Which forces us to confront an even more disturbing reality.
What's that?
Smuggling a body in a massive suitcase or inside a catering cargo crate, that's something we have seen before in criminal history.
Right, like the classic movie trope.
Right. It's difficult, but it's physically possible. But that is not what happened here. The killer didn't hide the body from the flight crew in a box.
No.
The killer paraded the body right in front of them, out in the open.
The eyewitness testimony is what elevates this from a murder to something deeply unsettling. The pilot and the flight attendant both swore under oath that Marcus Vance walked up the stairs of the jet, spoke directly to them, and even sat down in his leather seat for a pre-flight drink.
Yeah.
We're talking about two highly trained, sober aviation professionals who genuinely believe they were interacting with a living, breathing human being.
Yeah.
How is that psychologically possible? I mean, if a dead body is walking towards you, wouldn't every instinct in your brain scream that something is horribly wrong?
You would think so, right? But if we look at the mechanics of human psychology, specifically how visual perception works, it's a terrifying masterclass in the power of expectation.
Okay, unpack that for me.
The human brain is not a camera that objectively records reality. It is essentially a prediction engine. Gestalt psychology and theories of predictive coding tell us that we see what we expect to see.
Oh, fascinating.
And our brains actively filter out anomalies to save processing power. The flight crew fully expected their billionaire boss to board his plane at that exact time. They expected him to walk up those stairs.
Right.
So when they saw a figure moving in the shape of Marcus Vance, dressed in his signature heavy winter coat, their brains immediately filled in the massive gaps. They didn't look at the figure and assess whether it was a corpse.
They just saw the boss.
Exactly. They looked for their boss.
Yeah.
And because they expected their boss is what they perceived.
Like those selective attention tests, you know, the famous video where you're told to count how many times people pass a basketball?
Yes, the gorilla video.
Yeah. And because you're so focused on the ball, you completely fail to see the person in a gorilla suit walk right through the middle of the screen.
Exactly that mechanism, but amplified by authority and routine. The crew was busy prepping the cabin, running checklists. They gave a passing glance to a familiar silhouette in a familiar context.
But they didn't just see him from a distance across a tarmac. They interacted with him intimately inside the cabin. The testimony says he complained to the flight attendant saying, "The cabin pressure is a bit heavy."
Right.
We'll definitely come back to that specific phrase later because it's crucial. But then, and this is the part that just sends shivers down my spine, the flight attendant served him his favorite vintage scotch.
Yeah, this is where it gets crazy.
I can buy the idea that witnesses lie. I can buy that their memories play tricks on them, or that predictive coding made them ignore a stiff walk. But you cannot fake physical forensic evidence at the scene.
No, you can't.
The fingerprint analysis on that crystal scotch glass perfectly matched Marcus Vance. If a man is dead, he has no muscle control. How does a dead man hold a drink?
This is the detail where the sheer cold-blooded theatricality of the killer comes into terrifying focus. You're absolutely right. A dead man doesn't reach out, grasp a glass, and take a sip.
Right.
Which means we have to visualize the horrifying reality of what actually happened in that cabin during boarding. The killer was right there.
Oh, okay.
They had to physically manipulate the corpse's arm. They had to force the dead, cold hand to wrap around the crystal glass and press the thumb firmly enough to leave a distinct, scoreable print.
That is deeply disturbing to picture. The killer is standing there, holding a dead man's hand around a glass of scotch, while the flight attendant is what? Just turning around to put away a bottle?
It is macabre performance art of the highest order. Think about the incredible risk involved. The killer is doing this right in front of the flight crew, capitalizing on the exact second their attention is momentarily diverted. They had to ensure the condensation on the cold glass interacted perfectly with the natural sebaceous oils remaining on the dead skin of Vance's thumb. This shows a level of composure, psychological control, and meticulous planning that is truly chilling.
Yeah, that takes nerve.
The killer wasn't just being dramatic. They were manufacturing an ironclad alibi for the timeline. A fingerprint on a glass, served mid-boarding by a witness, proves physical contact. It proves, to any standard surface-level police investigator, that the man was undeniably alive on the plane.
Because if the fingerprint is there, the police assume he put it there.
Exactly.
But if the killer had to physically manipulate the victim's hand to leave that print, rigor mortis would be their biggest enemy. A body gets incredibly stiff after death.
It does.
If you have to bend a dead man's fingers around a glass or manipulate his legs to walk upstairs, you need a pliable, completely unmarked body. Which forces us to ask, how do you murder a billionaire without leaving a single trace of trauma?
To understand how the illusion on the flight was possible, we have to understand the reality of the penthouse. The investigative report revealed that Marcus Vance's ground-based luxury penthouse was subjected to severe, highly sophisticated mechanical sabotage.
Sabotage.
Yes. The building's HVAC and ventilation system was physically altered to flood his master bedroom with pure nitrogen gas while he slept.
Nitrogen gas.
Yeah.
Let me try an analogy here because I think people misunderstand how suffocating works.
Sure.
If you're listening to this right now, take a deep breath and hold it. Just hold it for a few seconds. That burning, rising panic you start to feel in your chest. That feeling of, I need air right now.
Yeah.
That isn't actually your body realizing it lacks oxygen. It's like draining a swimming pool while someone is still floating in it on a raft, but doing it so slowly, inch by inch, that they don't even realize the water is gone until they hit the concrete.
That is a highly accurate way to conceptualize it. Nitrogen asphyxiation is incredibly deceptive, which is why it is used in some industrial safety protocols and, tragically, in industrial accidents.
Right.
When we think of suffocating, we think of the movies Panic, gasping, the desperate, violent struggle for air. But that physiological panic response, what medical professionals call the hypercapnic alarm, is not triggered by a lack of oxygen in your system.
It's not.
No. It is triggered entirely by a buildup of carbon dioxide in your bloodstream.
So when you hold your breath, your body isn't screaming, I need oxygen. It's screaming, get this toxic carbon dioxide out of me.
Exactly. Chemoreceptors in your brainstem monitor the pH level of your blood, which drops and becomes acidic when CO2 accumulates.
Okay.
That acidity triggers the violent urge to breathe. But when a room is slowly flooded with pure nitrogen gas, the atmospheric oxygen is displaced, but you are still exhaling your own carbon dioxide normally into the room.
Oh, wow.
The CO2 doesn't build up in your blood, therefore the hypercapnic alarm never sounds. Your brain never registers that anything is wrong.
That's terrifying.
The body simply continues to breathe, completely unaware that the air it is taking in contains zero life-sustaining oxygen. To the victim, it feels like absolutely nothing is happening. They might experience a slight sense of euphoria or lightheadedness, their cognitive functions gently power down, they fall into a deeper sleep, and they never wake up.
Jeez.
It is a completely silent, entirely peaceful death.
And crucially for the killer's plan, it leaves absolutely no obvious trauma on the body. There are no ligature marks around the neck from a rope, no defensive wounds or skin under the fingernails from fighting off an attacker.
No bruising from a struggle.
Right, no petechial hemorrhaging in the eyes that you see with strangulation.
Which answers the question of why this highly complex method was chosen. The nitrogen wasn't just utilized because it was quiet and allowed the killer to strike while Vance slept.
Then why?
It was specifically chosen to keep the merchandise pristine.
Oof, merchandise.
Think about the intense physical requirements of the next phase of the plan. The killer needs this dead body to bend its knees, walk up a flight of stairs, sit in a chair, and wrap its hand around a glass.
Yeah.
If Vance had been poisoned with something like strychnine that causes violent convulsions or strangled in a desperate struggle, rigor mortis would set in differently. The muscles might be locked in defensive postures.
Because of the stress.
Yes, lactic acid buildup from a struggle accelerates rigor. The body had to be intact, completely pliable, and visually flawless for the illusion of life to hold up under the scrutiny of the flight crew just hours later.
Okay, so the killer has successfully created a perfectly preserved, deceased billionaire in a penthouse. We've established the what and the why of the nitrogen. But this is where we have to tackle the absolute craziest part of this deep dive.
Let's do it.
This is the core of the impossibility, because a pliable body with no rigor mortis is still 200 pounds of entirely dead weight.
Oh, absolutely.
If you've ever tried to pick up a sleeping child to move them to their bed, you know they feel like they weigh twice as much because there is no muscle tension helping you. Picking up a grown man, extremely difficult.
Nearly impossible for one person to do gracefully.
Right. So making him stand upright and walk up a narrow, steep flight of airplane stairs in the wind, that should be physically impossible. How on earth did the killer turn a 200-pound corpse into a functioning, walking, macabre marionette?
The answer to that impossibility lies in the specific clues left behind on the body and in the cabin, pointing to the device used to puppet him.
Okay, what was it?
The investigative report confirmed the use of a medical-grade automated exorobot device. This wasn't a remote-controlled toy. This machinery was strapped directly onto the corpse, acting as an external, motorized skeleton, and it was completely hidden beneath Vance's heavy, oversized winter coat.
Okay, I have to push back hard on the physics of this because I've seen videos of modern robotics. I've seen the Boston Dynamics robots online.
Sure, everyone's seen those.
They are incredible, yes, but they sound like a washing machine full of wrenches when they move. The hydraulic pumps are loud.
They are.
And more importantly, especially walking upstairs, requires incredible, instantaneous balance. Human walking is essentially controlled falling. Your brain is making thousands of micro-adjustments in your ankles, knees, and hips every millisecond just to keep your center of gravity over your feet.
That's spot on.
A corpse has no muscle tension to contribute to that. It's a floppy sack of meat. How did a hidden robotic suit not just violently topple over backward the second it lifted a foot off the tarmac?
Your skepticism is entirely warranted, and the Boston Dynamics comparison is a great anchor point. But it also explains why the distinction of medical grade and automated is so vital to understanding the clues.
Also,
You mentioned hydraulic pumps being loud. Medical grade exorobots, particularly those designed for human rehabilitation or assistance, don't use loud hydraulics. They use high torque, silent electric servomotors and pneumatic actuators precisely because they are meant to be used around people without causing distress. Ah, okay, so it's quiet.
very quiet. As for the balance, we are talking about highly sophisticated gyroscope-stabilized exoskeleton technology utilizing what robotics engineers call zero moment point, or ZMP, algorithms.
0 moment point. What does that mean in this context?
It's the mathematical algorithm that keeps bipedal robots from falling over. These devices are designed with complex, load-bearing computers. They don't just blindly move a leg forward. They continuously calculate the center of gravity dynamically in real time.
Wait, so it's doing the math in real time?
Exactly, yeah, every millisecond. When the robotic leg lifts to take a step up the airplane stairs, the motorized torso of the suit intentionally leans the heavy, dead upper body of the corpse forward to counterbalance the shift in weight.
That is wild.
It is literally doing the balancing math for the dead body, reacting to the shifting wind on the tarmac, and maintaining the center of gravity over the planted foot. That is horrifyingly brilliant. It's a machine doing the micro adjustments the brain used to do. And that explains the massive clue of the heavy winter coat. Obviously, its primary function is to hide the metal joints, the lithium-ion battery packs, and the pneumatic actuators strapped to his legs and spine.
Right.
But it serves an equally important secondary psychological function. Even with ZMP algorithms, an exoskeleton walking a corpse is going to look slightly off.
It's going to look very unnatural.
The gait will be highly mechanical, the posture unnaturally stiff and upright. A massive, bulky winter coat obscures the human silhouette. It hides the mechanical rigidity and gives a visual excuse for why the person is moving so heavily.
Precisely. It masks the uncanny valley effect. And the clues don't stop at the visual level, they extend to the auditory. Let's re-examine that specific quote from the flight crew during boarding.
Oh, right, the cabin pressure quote.
They testified under oath that as Vance lumbered into the cabin, he complained, saying the cabin pressure is a bit heavy.
I knew we were coming back to this. At first glance, that just sounds like a demanding rich guy complaining about the environmental controls on his private jet. But with the context of the robotic suit, it changes everything.
It transforms from a casual complaint into a highly calculated piece of psychological misdirection.
It totally does. I feel heavy.
Yeah.
What if that wasn't Marcus Vance commenting on the air pressure at all?
What if it was something else entirely?
Yeah, what if that was a pre-recorded line triggered by the killer via a remote control to explain exactly why the boss was walking like he had lead in his shoes? Or, even simpler, what if it was a disguised voice from the killer themselves, who was standing right next to the body during boarding?
It's completely plausible.
It is the absolute perfect excuse delivered right before the crew can even form a question. I'm moving slowly, stiffly, and I look strange because the cabin pressure is getting to me. It intercepts their suspicion before it can even form.
It points to a deep, sophisticated understanding of human behavioral psychology. If you provide an excuse for an anomaly before the observer can even register the anomaly, their brain accepts the excuse and stops investigating.
Wow.
But the sheer sophistication of this medical-grade gyroscopic exorobot begs a massive, glaring question. You cannot go on the internet and just add an automated exoskeleton capable of independently walking a human corpse up a flight of stairs to your shopping cart.
Yeah, Amazon doesn't stock that.
This is bleeding-edge, highly specialized technology, so where did the killer get it?
Which naturally leads us to the next major focus of our deep dive, and the person who instantly became the prime suspect, the co-pilot. And I look at this part of the story as a dark, modern Frankenstein tale.
That's a very apt comparison.
It's a story of corporate espionage, stolen inventions, and poetic, albeit twisted, justice.
Let's deeply examine the background of the co-pilot to understand his role and why he became the focal point of the investigation. Before he was flying private jets for billionaires, he was a highly specialized mechanical engineer. Specifically, he was the lead designer for a family-owned company that created automated rescue suits for deep-sea divers.
And these weren't just your standard, bulky, atmospheric diving suits. The entire premise of his company's technology was to create a failsafe.
Yes.
A suit that could automatically walk an unconscious or severely injured or dead diver back up from the ocean floor to the safety of a diving bell or the surface. But why would you need a suit to walk an unconscious person underwater? Why not just pull them up with a tether?
Because of the lethal physics of deep-sea pressure. In saturation diving, divers work hundreds of feet below the surface. At those depths, the human body absorbs massive amounts of inert gases like nitrogen or helium into the blood and tissues.
Oh, right. The bends.
Exactly. If a diver suffers an emergency, say nitrogen narcosis, oxygen toxicity, or they just black out from an equipment failure, you cannot simply yank them to the surface with a rope. The rapid decrease in pressure would cause the dissolved gases in their blood to expand into massive bubbles.
Decompression sickness. It would literally boil their blood.
It is fatal. They have to be brought up slowly or walked into a pressurized diving bell on the seafloor. But if the diver is unconscious, they can't swim to the bell.
That makes sense.
That is the problem the co-pilot's company solved. They built an exoskeleton suit that, upon detecting a loss of consciousness, would lock the diver's joints, use automated gyroscopes to balance their dead weight against the ocean currents, and literally march their unconscious body to the safety of the pressurized bell using acoustic telemetry for guidance.
It is incredible technology. Do you see the direct, terrifying parallel here?
It's undeniable.
The technology designed to puppet an unconscious human through the crushing, hostile pressure of the deep ocean is conceptually identical to the technology needed to puppet a dead human up the stairs of an aircraft. The physics are remarkably similar, balancing dead weight, automated bipedal movement, and entirely overriding the lack of human consciousness.
The engineering leap from a deep-sea rescue suit to a terrestrial walking corpse puppet is actually quite small. You strip out the heavy pressure shielding, replace the acoustic underwater telemetry with terrestrial radio frequencies, and you have your macabre marionette.
But there is a massive catch. The co-pilot didn't own this brilliant technology anymore,
No, he didn't.
because Marcus Vance, the dead billionaire sitting frozen in the landing gear, had ruthlessly bankrupted the co-pilot's family company years prior. According to the financial records, Vance used aggressive, predatory litigation to tie the company up in court, waited for them to bleed out financially, forced them into bankruptcy, and then swept in through a shell corporation to buy up all their revolutionary patents for absolute pennies on the dollar.
If we look at the psychological profile this paints, it gives investigators a visceral, simmering, undeniable motive.
A huge motive.
This was not a crime of passion committed in the heat of the moment. This is a crime of deep, cultivated, agonizing resentment. The working theory of the initial police investigation was that the co-pilot didn't just want Marcus Vance dead. Death wasn't enough.
What did he want?
He wanted to use Vance's own greedy acquisition, the stolen deep-sea suit patents, as the literal murder weapon.
It's almost literary in its cruelty. The ruined creator uses his stolen, twisted invention to exact poetic justice on the corporate thief. The co-pilot modifies his own life-saving technology to force the dead billionaire to walk into his own high-altitude tomb using the very patents the billionaire stole from him.
It is incredibly poetic, which is exactly why the police latched onto it. From an investigator's standpoint, it is a grand slam.
Yeah, it looks perfect.
The co-pilot has the highly specialized technical expertise required to modify the deep-sea robotics into a terrestrial walking exoskeleton. He has authorized access to the private plane to ensure the plot goes smoothly, and he has a documented, undeniable, heavily paper-trailed motive. He is the absolute perfect candidate for this crime.
It wraps the whole case up in a neat little bow. You find the body, you find the clues of the stolen tech under the winter coat. You look at the guy flying the plane who invented the tech and vehemently hated the victim. Case closed. Lock him up.
Exactly what they thought.
Except, as with any story that seems a little too perfectly plotted, there is always one loose thread. And in this case, the co-pilot's tragic backstory was actually being weaponized against him by a single, invisible mistake in the airwaves.
Which brings us to the final and most crucial twist in this deep dive. The fatal frequency and the explanation of why the real puppeteer is still hiding in plain sight.
This is the part of the research that completely flipped the script for me. So the killer goes through all of this unbelievable trouble. The silent nitrogen gas, the engineering of the robot suit, the heavy winter coat, the psychological misdirection of the heavy pressure, quote, the physical manipulation of the fingerprint on the Scotch glass.
Flawless execution.
They execute it flawlessly.
Yeah.
But they make a mistake. A tiny, invisible electronic mistake in the airwaves that they couldn't scrub away.
The exorobot suit, for all its automated ZMP gyroscopes and balancing algorithms, was not fully autonomous. It wasn't an artificial intelligence making its own decisions.
It still needed to be driven, right?
It still needed directional inputs. It needed a synchronization signal to tell it when to walk forward, when to stop, when to turn, and perhaps when to trigger those pre-recorded voice lines. It relied on a specific, heavily restricted cellular frequency to receive those telemetry commands from a remote control.
Okay.
The local police completely missed this detail during their initial physical sweep of the aircraft because they were looking for physical evidence, not radio waves.
But modern private jets are essentially giant flying data centers. The automated flight data recorder, the black box, doesn't just record altitude and engine performance. It records everything. including monitoring ambient electronic signals inside the cabin to ensure there is no dangerous interference with the plane's navigation system.
Right, they log everything.
And when the aviation data analysts finally decrypted the flight log weeks later, they found the restricted cellular frequency pinging at the exact moment Marcus Vance was boarding. And far more importantly, the system triangulated exactly where that signal was originating from.
That triangulation is the critical data point that shatters the entire police theory. The signal was not originating from the cockpit.
Let's stop and really think about the physical geography of an airplane and what that means. If the co-pilot was actively flying the plane, communicating with air traffic control, running pre-flight checks, starting the engines, he's physically strapped into his seat at the very front of the aircraft.
Yes, he is.
Furthermore, he is sitting behind a post-9/11 reinforced electronically locked cockpit door. Those doors are lined with materials that heavily degrade low-wattage RF signals. He physically could not be transmitting a clear control signal from the front of the plane to the back of the passenger cabin.
The physics of the signal propagation prove it. The flight log undeniably proves the remote control signal was being broadcast from within the passenger cabin itself. So we have to look at the manifest. Who was in the passenger cabin during the boarding process and the initial hours of the flight?
The passenger cabin only had 2 living people in it. The flight attendant, who was prepping the drinks, and the primary pilot, who was out of the cockpit greeting the passenger as he boarded. So if the co-pilot couldn't possibly be holding the remote control, because he's locked in the cockpit, who was?
One of the 2 people standing right next to the corpse.
Wow.
This revelation completely upends the entire narrative. What is so deeply fascinating here is the sheer brilliance and malice of the frame job. The real killer, either the primary pilot or the flight attendant, deliberately utilized the co-pilot's stolen technology. They didn't just steal a robot suit, they stole the co-pilot's entire motive.
Oh man, think about the layers of planning. They had to know about the deep-sea patents. They had to know about the ruthless bankruptcy. They had to know the bitter history between Marcus Vance and the co-pilot. They likely used shell companies of their own to quietly acquire the deep-sea tech out of the bankruptcy fire sale, specifically to use it for this murder.
And they did it because they intimately understand how law enforcement operates. They know that police and prosecutors operate on the path of least resistance.
Yeah, they want an easy close.
The real killer knew that the exact second the police found a robotic exoskeleton and traced its patents back to the co-pilot's old ruined family company, the investigation would screech to a halt.
Because it's too perfect.
The police would be so blinded by the perfect, poetic motive that they wouldn't look any further. The co-pilot was a meticulously chosen, perfectly placed scapegoat. The real killer hid their flawless crime behind the co-pilot's tragic backstory.
So what does this all mean for the horrifying reality of what actually happened in that passenger cabin? Let's go back to the boarding process and picture it. The primary pilot and the flight attendant are both there.
Right.
One of them is a completely innocent witness, thoroughly fooled by the heavy winter coat and a psychological misdirection, perhaps terrified and confused by the stiff movements, but ultimately believing they're serving their boss.
Yep.
But the other one?
The other one is the puppeteer.
Imagine the sheer, terrifying psychological control that takes. One of those 2 people played the role of the grieving, shocked witness perfectly. They swore under oath to the police that they saw a living billionaire.
Yeah.
They might have been the one who literally poured the vintage scotch. They acted completely normal, running through their aviation checklist, making small talk, while simultaneously, secretly, holding a restricted frequency transmitter in their pocket.
It's chilling.
They were using a hidden joystick or the tactile keypad concealed inside their uniform pocket to physically pilot a dead corpse up the stairs, right in front of the face of their innocent colleague.
It requires a breathtaking level of sociopathy. They were standing mere feet away from the corpse they had just silently gassed with nitrogen hours earlier in a penthouse. They were operating the dead body of their employer like a video game character, adjusting its balance, moving its legs, perhaps triggering its voice, and making casual conversation with their coworker to sell the illusion.
It turns the entire concept of the locked room mystery completely on its head. The mystery wasn't a magic trick at all. It was pure, unadulterated misdirection. We spent so much time asking the impossible question. How did the killer vanish from a sealed metal tube in the sky?
And the terrifying answer is they never vanished. They were standing right there the entire time. The killer was the very person who reported him missing.
Wow.
The killer is the one who walked down the aisle, knocked on the suite door, bypassed the lock, looked at the empty room, and feigned shock to their innocent colleague. They constructed an impossible puzzle from the inside out.
So we have gone on a staggering, unbelievable journey today. We started with an impossible forensic timeline and a frozen body in a landing gear bay. We explored the silent, invisible mechanics of a nitrogen death in a luxury penthouse. We broke down the bleeding-edge physics and macabre reality of a stolen deep-sea exorobot wrapped in a winter coat lumbering up the stairs of a private jet.
A lot of ground covered.
And finally, we uncovered the brilliantly cruel, invisible frame-up of a ruined co-pilot, all orchestrated by a hidden transmission in the cabin.
It is a profound and terrifying demonstration of how the modern world we live in can be manipulated. Technology that was explicitly meant to save human lives, to pull unconscious divers from the crushing depths of the ocean, can be seamlessly inverted by human malice to create the perfect illusion of life.
Yeah, that's the scariest part.
We rely so heavily on our data, on our forensic timelines, on the things we can touch, see, and measure. But this case proves that if a killer is smart enough to manipulate the data, if they can freeze the timeline, fake the fingerprint, hack the psychology of the witnesses, and puppet the body, they can manipulate reality itself.
And it leaves you with a deeply unsettling thought to take with you. The real killer used restricted cellular frequencies and bleeding-edge medical robotics to literally puppeteer a human being right in front of trained, sober witnesses. And they almost got away with it because everyone was too busy looking at the wrong man with the obvious motive.
Exactly.
As technology continues to advance at a breakneck pace, as the line between human movement and mechanical automation continues to blur into indistinguishability, how can you ever truly be sure that the person walking into the room with you, speaking to you, sitting down next to you, is actually the one pulling their own strings? Keep your eyes open.